Super excited to do this talk with my friend Delali. So Delali is the CEO of Fearless, two Fearlesses actually, digital services firm out of Baltimore, and also Fearless Sports. They have just, this guy does so much. I don't know how he does it all. He also has like the Hutch incubator that he started up and has really helped build up the community of Baltimore. Then took on projects down in Montgomery to help build up the community in Montgomery. And just a lot of different things. Also has helped me personally. So when I was leaving and starting my own company, look, a lot of people in this space, they don't like to share. I'm just gonna get that out. And I'm this, straight out of the military, don't know what I'm doing. And Delali was the person that always picked up the phone, answered every question I had. Everybody else was like, we need an NDA. And Delali was like, here, let me send you everything. And so he's a giver. And what I really like and why I wanted to do this talk with him is he really lives out his beliefs. So things like purpose over profit and building this community. That's why he's willing to share all kinds of things that most companies would never share with another company that sometimes ends up being a competitor in this space. So I look up to this guy, and when it comes to culture, his culture inspired me. I'm going to tell you a quick story. It was the first RFI I put out for Kessel Run. I don't know if you know this story. Delali responded with Skylight and Chris Carnes, and I got this RFI. I was driving in the car with Carlo, and I was like, Carlo, stop, you got to look at this. And I was going through stacks of RFIs. If you ever put out an RFI, I had like 50 of them. And this one just like jumped off the page, and it was oozing culture, and that was our big thing at the time.
The paper was purple, so that's probably what it was.
Yeah, and it just jumped off the page. I called him like 2 days later, and ever since that moment, I've just been following this guy like, oh my gosh, how does he create culture that is like palpable, tangible? And also, I really wanted to have him up here because the next talk is on transformational leadership, and you're looking at a living, breathing example of it. So without further ado, we'll get started. You don't get to say any embarrassing things about me, none? But
I actually do. So, I'm really appreciative to be up on the stage with Bryon today. And same, since we met his first day at Kessel Run, I've been a big fan, again, not just with the passion that he leads with, but also that he puts everything he has in whatever he does. So Bryon's all in. He's not kind of a person that's in the gray, on the fence, very opinionated in a strong and very good way. So I'm humbled, excited to be here with you. I feel like I should have my ankles out, man. I don't know, I feel like I'm underdressed, but I'm gonna rock with it. So we're gonna talk today a little bit about culture. And you might be thinking, am I hitting the button? Maybe?
Clicker's not working again.
All right.
Now we're gonna get 20 slides.
We are. So, all right. So we're gonna talk about culture a little bit, right? And you may be thinking, oh my God, another culture talk. I'm here, I wanna talk about production, I wanna talk about Kubernetes, I wanna figure out how to build my pipelines and make them more resilient. I get that. And what I'm gonna offer today is the reason why all of those things either happen or don't happen within your organization is all about culture. It's why some organizations, given the same technology, given the same processes, given all the same everything, some make it and some don't. Culture. And so we're gonna define it a little bit today, right? And we're gonna talk about what it is, we're gonna talk about what it isn't, and we're gonna give you a couple of plays.
It's like the icing on the cake, right?
Kind of not like the icing on the cake. Culture is the cake. It is every part of why your organization does what it is it does. It is every nook, it is every cranny, it is every ingredient, it is every layer, including the icing.
I don't know if I love that definition though, because culture is kind of static and it lasts for a long time, and cake only does that if you put it in the freezer.
Cake might last for a while, but your culture is not static. I love this question. Every time someone new joins Fearless, we do a Meet the CEO conversation, and inevitably, every single time I get this question, they say, the culture is really awesome. What are you gonna do to keep the culture as we're growing? And I always laugh because we had the same conversation. We were doubling from, I think, 7 to 15, and then 15 to 30. And every time they're like, the culture's awesome. You're bringing in all of these terrorists, and they're gonna break the thing that we love so much. And every single time we're able to alleviate it, and the answer is, the culture is gonna change. We are going to do nothing to keep it the same.
But it's like
Cultures
a feeling.
evolve.
It's like a feeling though, right?
Kind of not like a feeling. It is your way of life. And I know you may be thinking, and Baby Yoda, I'm sorry we had to make Yoda purple, it's our thing, but, and you may be thinking, well, I can feel the culture is strong in you, right? And I get it, but it is a way of life. It is why your organization moves and ticks and operates and breathes the way that it does. And so we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about how it shows up. We're gonna talk about how you operationalize it to make sure it's not just fluff, but it is foundation and a core part of what it is that you guys do. So this is my working definition of culture. I believe that culture is the sum total of the organization's beliefs, values, behaviors, and your rituals. Say that again. It is the sum total of your beliefs, values, behaviors, and your rituals. And so many times we think about the icing on the cake. And that typically is the rituals that you might see. But I'll start from the bottom. Your beliefs, these are the things that you know to be true. You don't need any advice. You don't need any data. You just know these to be true. These may be your political beliefs. It may be religious beliefs. They're things that are just true because you've deemed them to be so. It is your worldview. It's who you are. It's part of your identity. Now, because and through the lens of those beliefs, you create some values. Because I believe this thing, I'm going to assign worth to these activities and these things that I think are important to me. And I'll give you some examples of this. From there, you'll associate a set of behaviors, some things that you do, and then the rituals may come. So let me give you an example. So you're creating a new organization, and a part of this organization, you've determined that you serve and you support the greatest military on planet Earth. They are amazing. That is your belief. You hold that to be true. And so because of that belief, you say, we're gonna push things to production. We're gonna make sure that they've got capability when they need it, before they need it, so that we maintain our superiority. That's a value. Get them what they need before they need it. And so what's your behavior? You say, okay, we're gonna institutionalize this. And so the behavior that we have within the organization is that every single person must push a story to prod every single day. One story to prod. Not the team, not the division. Every single person must push one story to prod every single day. Behavior. And so people get excited about that. They're starting to roll this out in the organization. And one team says, you know what, let's celebrate. We're going to cheer about this. And so whenever something gets to prod, they got a bell. They say, we're going to ring a bell. And so the team's excited. They're pumped, by stoked. They're giving high fives, ringing bells. Another team hears the bell, say, what's that? Before you know it, everyone's collecting bells. There's big bells, little bells. Bells are going off left and right because that is the ritual that they're adopting. So they say, that's not good enough, right? When we finish our sprint, if everyone meets their sprint goal, a bell isn't big enough. We're gonna get a gong. And we're gonna take a mat and we're gonna bang on the gong. And so everyone's giving high fives. You're eating pizza. You're having happy hour. Great. And inevitably, in any organization that's performing at a really high level, at some point, people want to get the tour. And it's what we did with you guys. Let's get a tour. What's going on? Let's take some notes. So people come, they're coming to give a tour, and they're walking around because their organization isn't performing. And so they're walking through the halls, and they're seeing the teams excited. They're seeing the teams doing work. They get to the kitchen, and they see the coffee, and they see the nitro, and they see all the drinks and the soda, and they see the gummy bears, not the terrible ones, right, but the Albanese ones, the delicious ones that feed your soul, right? They see those, and so you're doing something right. And lo and behold, they hear the bell ringing. They're like, what's that? Oh, someone just pushed something to prod. When that happens here, we ring a bell. And they happen to be there on a Friday. The sprint was over, and they're hearing the gong. They say, all right, they're banging on the gong. What's that? Everyone meant their sprint deliverable. They go to happy hour. They eat the pizza. And then they're furiously, they're taking notes, right? And they get back to their organization. They talk to their leadership, and they say, you know, our organization, we're not performing. What'd you learn? Tell us what you learned. How do we implement that within our team? And he says, you know what? I got an idea. He said, I know how to fix it. And he pulls out a box and says, we need more bells. Because if you have bells and if you have a gong, you're high performing. But what he didn't understand is the bells are a ritual, but it is underpinned because their belief in the superiority of the military and is the reason why they want to get them capability. So they're pushing a story to production. And once they get to production, they ring a bell. That is not the end all. That is the icing that you see, but it's not the cake. And so culture is something that is actionable. You can see it, you can touch it, you can smell it, you can feel it. It is why your organization ticks. And we're gonna get into this a little bit. And it absolutely drives everything that you do.
So how do you assess where your culture is at, and what are some of the benefits of actually operationalizing it? For the last several years, Gene talked this morning about the DORA research, confirming what many of us in industry and elsewhere have known for a long time, and that's that culture is a key component of DevOps and technology transformations. He showed you this Westrom diagram, and he talked through it, so instead I'm going to use an example. One of my favorites, everybody was trying to replicate Toyota production system back in the early auto manufacturing days, their level of quality and their ability to turn out these vehicles, and there was an Ondon cord, right? And similarly, everybody came and took photos of the entire floor, the factory floor, and they would photograph the Ondon cords. They would recreate this factory floor back in the US. GM did it, everybody was doing this. But nobody would pull the Ondon cord. The Ondon cord was the thing that you pulled. It stopped the entire assembly line. And in Japan, when you did that, a manager would come down, and guess what they would do? They would help you, right? So people pulled the cord, they fixed the issue, and now we have high quality, and they would fix that issue so it wouldn't happen again. But in the American culture, stopping the assembly line was horrible. The manager would come down and yell at you, berate you, so nobody pulled the Ondon cord. Same exact everything, different culture. And when you put those two people in those different cultures, they didn't want to pull the Ondon cord because they were messengers and they were being shot instead of trained. And so that's a key difference that we see in these organizations. And this one is also important. We talk about additional research from Google Aristotle project. You heard psychological safety come up. They found 5 key indicators, and it wasn't what they expected. 5 key indicators of high-performing teams. And the first one, actually the first 4, are things government's really good at, right? The work definitely has meaning. I don't think there's any debate about that. And it has impact, right? It makes a difference in the world, and it's personally valuable to the people who do it. Structure and clarity, we're usually really good at that, although we've been talking a little bit about the kinds of structures we might need to change for a different paradigm. And especially when you talk about the armed forces, dependability is just off the charts, right? It's something that they hire for. But one thing that we're really bad at in government, in my opinion, and it's just the nature of hierarchical organizations, is psychological safety. This ability to be vulnerable in front of your team, which allows you to experiment and to learn. And it relates back to that Ondon cord example, right? Are you safe to experiment? Are you safe to fail? I think it's taken on a new meaning in some modern cultural cases, but I always like to distinguish between voice rights and decision rights. Everybody has voice rights. Doesn't mean that you get to make the decision, but everybody on the team should have those voice rights. And then one last thing, what an operationalized culture looks like. This is a smaller version of Dora's BFD, the big freaking diagram, and Gene showed components of this. But this specifically hones in on organizational culture and how it relates to software delivery and operational performance. So there's a few things. Gene will go into it in more depth in the roles of transformational leadership. But as you would expect, when leaders give people in their organization trust and voice, based on what we just heard about the research between Google Aristotle and Dora, we see that produces a better organizational culture, and that in turn drives software delivery performance. And the research shows that it is, in fact, driving that. And one other piece of that is autonomy, in and of itself, also contributes to software delivery and operational performance, in addition to the culture. And so when we put all of these things together, we see that when we do the right things culturally, it leads to the kinds of actions and behaviors that reinforce software delivery performance and ultimately organizational performance. So just to quickly recap some of them, we have the ones I just talked about, but improved job satisfaction. I highlighted in green one that Gene said this morning. I think it's one that we're all dealing with in GovTech, and especially lately with some of the talent flight issues and quiet quitting and all these things that are coming up. It makes you a recruiting magnet, right? Job satisfaction being measured by your Net Promoter Score. And then we have improved organizational identity and some things that are really important for retaining your talent, which is less burnout, less deployment pain, and less rework.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how do we get from the fluff, right, that we've been talking about, to actually foundational, and how do you bake this within your organization. And so we're going to give you a bit of a playbook, and we've got a couple plays for you. So play number 0, we're tech folks, so we like starting with 0. Play number 0 is define what matters. And so for us, right, you start talking about these beliefs, again, these things that you know to be true. And so here's a quick snapshot of the fearless values. The big one you see in purple, people matter. It is our belief. It's part of our identity. It's why it is we do the things that we do. Doing good is worth the effort, period. Not doing good is worth the effort if it's more profitable, not doing good is worth the effort as long as it's easier. Doing good is worth the effort, period. It's something that we believe, it's our identity, it's who we are, and everyone is indoctrinated in that, and that's how we behave, and we create rituals and activities and behaviors associated with that. Once you've got your list of beliefs within your organization, again, as you're starting, and it may be something that you are able to adopt as you go within whatever group that you're in today, you create your values, right? What are your values? And for Fearless, we call them our purple sauce, because we like purple cows. I'll tell you a story about that later if you pull me aside. And again, those are the things that you assign worth. For us, it's take initiative, create belonging, open dialogue, make an impact. So you've got your beliefs, it's your identity, it's what you know. You've got your values, it's what you assign worth. And we're going to talk about how you then start to break those things down. So before you get there, though, now that you have that backdrop, you've got to have something your organization is trying to get done. You've got some outcomes. You likely have a mission and a vision of your organization. If not, start there, bake those things in. But then what do you want to see? What are you trying to get done? So this might be your strategic plan, your operational plan. What are you trying to get done this quarter? What outcomes do you want to see? They're not just your goals. What outcome or transformation are you looking to get done within your organization? And some tips on creating that: make sure they're clear. Make sure there are things that people understand. They've got to be simple. This is not a 50-page document. Make it like 3 slides. Simple, clear, concise. Make them measurable. How do you know if you're getting there? Are you close? Are you 50% there? Are you 20% there? And what's so interesting is like every single day we operate in this world where we learn how to take themes and break them down into epics and epics into stories and then tasks and subtasks. And we can see far out, and we've got pipelines and we've got product roadmaps. And we know exactly how to get the product there. But when it comes time to how do you bake this into your organization? How do you transform or shift your culture? We're like, I don't know where to start. Take the same discipline, you bake it out, you break it down, and you chip away at it. Organizational tech debt, just as you target tech debt. Public. If you can make them public, great. If not, make them public to your organization. One of our beliefs, we talked about people matter. One of our values, create belonging. So part of who it is that we are is we believe that we want to be a space where everyone can contribute and bring all of who they are to the table. And as a result, we created goals. One called our 50-50 goal. By 2025, half of our company will be women, half of our company will be minorities across every department in the organization. We track that publicly. So anyone on the internet can call us out and make sure we're telling the truth, right? But it's something that we do. Keep some sort of scorecard. This is an example of how we track ours. Have one for your organization. Make sure people can see it. They can call you out. They can trend towards it. That you want to know if you're moving that way or not. Imagine working on a project every day for the last 6 months and there is no burn down. You have no clue if anything you're doing is getting you closer to the goal by the end of the expected outcome period. So make sure you measure it, make sure you track it, and make it available to everyone in the organization.
And then for play 2, we have to identify the elements of culture that can and can't change. And I failed at this at Kessel Run horribly. So if you go to the next slide, one of the statements that Pivotal Labs had that I loved was strong opinions loosely held. And I thought that applied to everything universally. It worked really great on all the product teams that I was on. But what I found was, we weren't documenting some of these things about our culture. We weren't making the measurements visible. And it made it really easy for people to change them, for the organization to change. Like you said, how do you keep the culture, right? And what I learned is that, yes, you can have strong opinions loosely held about implementation, but you should have strong opinions strongly held about values, and you should have strong opinions mediumly held about process. That is to say that your values should hardly ever change. Mm-hmm. Your processes, they might change now and then, but you actually don't want to be changing them that frequently. But your implementation, yeah, that can change all the time. And so we've got to be really careful in our organizations that we apply context to some of these like slogans and catchphrases like strong opinions loosely held, because you don't want that everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. So once you have those things, how do you begin to do the hard work of baking it into your organization? When you take, and give you an example here, when we think about beliefs and processes, right, and values, right, and behaviors that you have within your organization, you've got to make sure they're included in every touch point in the company. And so for us, for example, because we have these beliefs, we think about them before we even tackle work. There's a team that looks like any project that comes in the door, we have a checklist of, does it meet our ethics standards, right? This is how we pick projects, and anyone in the company can veto it at any time. I don't think this is aligned with our values. And we've been called out like, this isn't a good fit for us. And you smile like we've had some use cases. Even past that, everything on our website, our job postings, our descriptions, they're all through the lens of our values and our beliefs. They check word for word. Is it matching who we say that we are? Are we going to attract the right type of person? During the cultural interviews, other interviews in the process where they're trying to see, can they demonstrate these values? Have we seen them? Are we seeing them in this person in particular? As a part of our orientation process, our 90-day orientation, by the time they get through it, they would have touched our values at least 10 to 15 times. They begin to identify them and where they've seen them in other people. They set their goals around them. We track them. We measure them during their 30, 60, and 90-day process.
I'm going to say something real quick. You mentioned that I smiled. One thing about Delali, I actually wanted to work with him on a particular project, and he turned me down.
It's true.
And that's happened actually a couple times since as well. And they're like sure bets, big sources of revenue for his company, great work, profitable work, but they don't align with their ethical standards. And so they turn them down. There just aren't that many people in this space that do that. And one thing I would encourage you as you're picking partners, because government's still going to need partners. We talked a lot about insourcing, but you're going to need partners. Find people that stay true to their values, because they're going to stay true to you as well. So just wanted to make a note of that.
Facts. So as you see here, here's an quick example of our values in the rows. And we have different departments within our organizations within columns. And I know it's really small. We'll send these out. I'll blow one up a little bit for you. So people matter, for an example. In our service department, that's where we house our disciplines. So our engineering herd, what we call our herds, our designers, our product folks all live within the services department. And our reminder to them, kind of their philosophy and their mantra is, there's a person. Whatever we do, there's a human on the other end. That is who they're working for. So any service, any product that we build, we're building it for a person in mind because we believe people matter. Business development. We prioritize people over profits. Imagine as you're looking for deals, and that's your mantra you're seeing on the wall every single day, you're going to pick things a little bit differently. You're going to make sure you're doing things for people. That's how you begin to operationalize these things within your organization. And when you look at values, again, you start to translate these into behaviors. What behaviors do you want to see? Now, if you ask, let's say, 20 people within your company, let's say take initiative was one of your values, and you ask 20 people, what does that mean? What does that look like? You might get 20 different answers. Now, if you're lucky, you might get answers that are actually pretty similar, and that's a good thing. But I'm going to argue they can't be similar. They have to be the same. It has to be exactly the same, and it has to be repeatable. So there's no question when you say take initiative, this is what it means. In our organization, we say initiative means you're pushing at least one thing to production, one story. If that's what you believe, if that's what you're doing, everyone should understand and acknowledge that. And so you start talking about what does it look like? Literally, what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And have a bookend what it is not. So people know where the boundaries are because they can get overboard. For example, it might look like pushing something to production. It might sound like, and you literally write this in, it might sound like people ringing a bell. It might sound like people giving a high five. It might sound like people praising someone else for doing a good job. It also might look like, and you spell this out in words, before you push a second story, help someone else get their first story done. That is what we mean by initiative. It might feel like encouragement. It might feel like someone's giving you a high five. It may feel good because you feel supportive. And then you also include what it is not. It does not mean we like initiatives, so go home every night and weekend and finish all the stories of everyone on the team because you think your team is an idiot, right? Everyone on the team is dumb. That is not what it means. Spell it out. Because someone's going to be confused, and that's not what you intended when you created this value. And so you want to make sure there's complete, crystal clear clarity as to what it means and how your values should be implemented into behaviors in your organization.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of ritual here. I know we talked about, beliefs are the core, but almost everything that you talked about from a sensory perspective is the rituals. And that's why rituals are so powerful. They engage all of the senses.
Sure.
And I think it's important to build rituals, just like Delali said. It might sound silly to say, like, oh, it sounds like bells ringing, but you should actually do that in your organization. You should think about it. And then one other thing that I think is equally important is this idea of measurement. So we will be hearing from Dominica de Grandes, who literally wrote the book on making work visible. But when you apply that to culture, I think it's really important to put those scoreboards out there and make it visible. Because as you see, I love this quote from Deming, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And so if your culture is producing bad results, it's a culture problem. A lot of people think it's an execution problem. but it's often a very foundational culture issue. And it's important that you push that across all your functionals. So we're talking to government here. Delali had a bunch of his internals, but I would say, like, think about procurement. If one of your values is continuous delivery to the government consumer, what's procurement doing to enable that, right? How are you enabling this value? I think that's really important. If you go to the next one, you just have to ask this question: is your culture giving you the outcomes that you want? And you only know that if you measure it. And just speaking even personally, if you don't make those visible, it's real easy to be like, I'm just going to hide this over here. But if they don't, if it isn't, how do you change it? So I think this is maybe one of the most important takeaways that I want for everyone is, I call this the NUMMI maneuver. There's this really great story of NUMMI auto manufacturing. It was a joint venture between Toyota and GM. Toyota's trying to enter the American market. They did this joint venture. GM graciously gave them their worst performing plant in the United States, the Fremont Assembly. It was so bad that people were drinking and gambling on the job, doing drugs on the job, sealing up Coke bottles indoors to sabotage vehicles that you would then purchase as a delighted consumer. And it's kind of like when I used to put the card on my bike. It's like that, right? It's a feature, right? But you would say these people have a horrible culture. They're drinking and gambling on the job. They're doing drugs. And GM was like, hey, Toyota, we'll help you. We'll help you take on the union so that you can get new employees. And Toyota said that won't be necessary. They took those same employees out to the Toyota production system in Japan. And instead of doing what we do in government, which is computer-based training to tell you what you should believe, right? We're gonna change thinking to change behaviors. They just started changing people's behaviors. They started at the top and worked their way backwards. And what we find is that those people, when they saw the results of working in a different way, when they saw what it could be like to pull the undone cord and have a manager come help them and they fix something and their product has more quality and they're proud of it and it's something that they can tell their families about, that changed their values and attitudes. That changes the culture. And so there's this tricky situation that we get into when we're doing transformation because we're saying we have to fix the culture and the architecture. Right. Some transformational leader, next talk, has to come in and figure out that NUMMI maneuver. Who is your Toyota production system? Who is your Toyota? Who's going to help you pull off that maneuver so that you can change the culture by changing behaviors first?
Yeah, and so you got to understand also, you've got to give space to allow your culture to evolve in some amazing ways. At Fearless, we often think about our success through 3 pillars. We call them our 3 Cs: customers, culture, community. They're all equal parts important. Customer being what we're delivering, capability to ensure that our transformations are moving forward and people are getting what they need from what it is that we do and we sell. Culture, everything internal, all of the touch points with people that work within our organization, everyone that lives inside of Fearless. And our community, the cities in which we reside, what are we doing to make them better than we found them before we got there? And all 3 are important. And how all of those intersected for us at Fearless for so long was around our physical facility and everyone working together in this space and collaborating, convening. And as you can imagine, pandemic hits and that disappears. I'm like, oh my God, who are we? What are we gonna do, right? And it's such a big part of who we are, but those were the rituals. Those were behaviors that we had that were baked in, but it wasn't who it is that we are. And so again, to kind of foot stomp this a little bit more, you hold really tightly onto your values and your beliefs. These are my hands, you can tell before I got my tan. And you've got your rituals and your rituals and your behaviors. Hold those loosely. Those things can change, they can evolve, they can adapt. Hold the values and beliefs tight. Other things can change and adapt and evolve over time. And as you think about designing your organization and your cultures, understand that things have changed and we're having different conversations than we had in the past. Lots of conversations about gender and identity and race and politics and all of these things that typically were taboo in the workspace. You have an organization full of people where those things are important to them. They have to be important to you. It must be baked in your culture and must be baked as a part of the conversation. So we'll talk a little bit now about what not to do.
Yeah. And real quick, one thing I want to say, just like on that last one, it's important to note the values didn't change.
Yeah.
The values didn't change. People wanted, maybe not everybody, but by and large, I think people wanted to create a safe space for people at work. And we thought that the way to respond to that was by not having the conversations. Right. But we still have the same value, but we learned that actually having those conversations is important. So the value didn't change, but the behaviors definitely have. And that's progress. Like that helps us move forward. Yep. So what not to do?
So first thing is, before you move forward, you got to buy some new tech. I'm sure there's like a platform as a service we can buy. buy some new tech, install it. Your culture is going to be transformed immediately.
No, you can't just change the things, right? New tech can't transform your culture. It's primarily a people problem. As Gene said this morning, the next obstacle is how we organize. So really have to focus on people and then process. Culture drives process, drives technology. So if you want to start a transformation, you have to start with the culture.
That's right. So this is actually a commercial, so we lied. We really think, just hire me and Bryon. We will fix all of your things for you. It's a great graphic. We will fix your company and your organizations for you.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't rely on us, right? Especially in government. Government, like all of the government employees, you are the heroes. I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to get your business. I really mean that. Like, we are guides. Mm-hmm. You have to be the heroes. You have to take the leading role and transform your culture. You and your team have to do the work. Consultants, we can be great guides for your journey, but you have to take the lead. And I think that's so important. When I look at every successful transformation that I've seen to date, all the contractors, of course, want to take credit for it, especially on the past performance write-ups. But like, government led those transformations, and that's critical.
But I mean, should you just get like a big stick and like beat everyone into submission?
No. So you can't only rely on like transforming your people. Transformation isn't something you do to people; it's something you do with people.
Got it.
And leaders, you're going to need to change as well. And I think this is a real struggle area for government, especially hierarchical organizations. The higher up you go in that hierarchy. So just a quick plea to leaders and managers at every level: if you're trying to digitally transform an organization, it's okay, in fact, highly encouraged, to get a coach. If you're going to go learn how to golf, and you don't know how to golf, you're probably going to get a coach. And then we're going to go spend $150 million on transformation. We're not going to get a coach. It probably shouldn't be the person that's also selling you things whatever. We should create some separation. But consider the story of the trillion-dollar coach, Bill Campbell. He helped build some of Silicon Valley's greatest companies: Google, Apple, Intuit, and total net worth for the people that he coached was over $1 trillion. That's why he's called the trillion-dollar coach. But we're talking about Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, Larry Page. Those are the people that he coached. If those people need coaches, I think all of us probably do as well.
Agreed.
All right, so we'll wrap it up with a recap here. What to do: make sure you start by defining what matters, align to your organizational outcomes, identify what can and can't change, operationalize your beliefs and values, measure performance and make it visible, and then allow things to evolve.
And some stuff not to do, right? Don't just change the tools, right? You got to make sure that transformation starts with the culture and everyone needs to be involved. Don't allow others just to swoop in and say they're going to fix all the things. You have to be part of the process and be willing to do the hard work over time. And don't just try to force change on others. Everyone, including you, needs to be part of this transformation and be fully bought in.
We went over time, so no Q&A.
All right, no Q&A.
Put the QR up there.
Hit us up if you need us.
Thank you so much, Delali. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.